They really are.
So one of the things I think is really interesting whenever I talk to people about the Future Collective, whenever I talk to people specifically about us two as founders, and also when we talk amongst ourselves, I guess, within the team. And that is the difference between you and I. And I think, I think there's something really, there's some magic, there's some secret sauce in founders of a business that are like night and day. I actually think probably a lot of people out there would imagine they would need to found a business with someone who they're completely aligned with.
Yeah,
and I think actually, in my experience, not just in you and I, but other founders I've known throughout my own career, it's when you're really, really different. And the differences show up all the time, but none more so than when we approach stuff, I would say. And I think, we always joke that you don't have a middle name, but actually we've now called you Matt, just do it Parry. And then I've always been called Late Kate.
Yeah, you are. And I think,
late. There's this kind of absolute tension between my need to procrastinate, to seek perfection, to absolutely ensure the 0.001% of things is perfect.
You don't need to do it.
To your approach to not just business but life just generally, and I think you've had it your whole life. Your school reports have even mentioned kind of just slow down. But you see things in a really different way. And I think what's interesting is when people talk at the moment in business about what's your thought on the future and where things are going and how do we need to approach things, and you often say we need to speed up.
Oh, I cannot think of another period of my career where I think the need to go faster has been more than it is now. I think that, I was both privileged and also frustrated for the latter part of my career before founding the Future Collective, because I went through that 12 to 15 years of digital transformation and talking about, are we a multi-channel or an omni-channel retailer every single year for about 10 years, and we need to develop our omni-channel strategy, whereby actually
for many years what we were,
what is digital and all of those things. Well, the reality is, I the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years, there's really not been anything digital, but I was in that space, so I was kind of like, what's the next thing? And I remember thinking, maybe about 18 months ago, I think, we were talking to one of our clients, and we were really lucky because we had some exposures to some really heavyweight academics in a certain sector, and I remember asking the question about, I personally felt through some research that I'd done, and sort of like my feeling was that the digital era was over, which meant that the industrial era was kind of over too, and we were moving into this new industry 5.0, which is the era of augmentation. But no one could answer my question, and I remember writing a blog about it, and that blog featured at the number one place on Google because no one was talking about Industry 5.0. And I remember validating it with a leading academic, and he was saying, you're the first person that's ever asked me about that, but I've been working on it for the last 10 years, and the answer to your question is yes, we are now Industrial 5.0. He said, but no one will agree with you because no one understands it yet. And I still look back to that post I wrote, which is 2.5 years ago, and I wrote about we need to start preparing for Industry 5.0, which is the future of automation and augmentation and AI. And I was kind of out there by myself, just writing, talking. But then that's evolved into, we've done a lot of work on that now. We've done the future of leadership, the future of technology, the future of purpose-led leadership, and it all links back to this new thing. So you're right. I do like to go into things in a way that I feel needs to be quicker, but right now, as I mentioned before, I don't think there's any time to slow down. And I'm not saying that in a way that we shouldn't be considered what we do. I just think there's more test and trial required than ever before.
Yes, and a new mentality to what's your definition of failure and success. So,
You
know, I don't think that people in organisations should be scared of prototyping.
No, that's a good word.
Building to learn, and all of the things that, you know, we know get you to the answer quicker.
Yeah.
But I think, if you've got any advice for anyone else that might be listening to this, watching this and thinking, do you know, I'm also that person, I'm always told to slow down, I'm always the first one waiting for other people in organisations to even understand what it is that I'm trying to say. Have you got any advice for them?
I think look at it in two ways. I think if you're up against a set of competitors, I think you've got to go faster, because if not, they'll get there to whatever it is before you.
Yeah.
I think if you're leading a team of, you know, anything like innovation or transformation, strategy, I think you've still got to go fast, but and I've talked about this before, it's always been a critical piece of feedback that I've got. I think now you have to bring people with you, because there's no time for people to catch up. It's going so fast. But I think if you're a competitive organisation, you have no choice but to go faster right now, and that's really hard, and that's a really hard place for a lot of businesses to be, because we're seeing a lot of things, particularly knowledge workers, that everything's been democratized, so what you couldn't do yesterday you can do today, and you can go faster, because if you automate your mundane things that take time and focus on what you were struggling with before to get to, then you can go faster. But that would be my advice. But the other thing is, look, like for 30 years, in my annual appraisal, I was told, please slow down, and I never did. So, you know, so go as fast as you can go.
This is the era for you.
Yeah, no, you know, I'm not like this. We hear the things about, you know, we've got to be really considerate, haven't we, for sure, about like burnout and mental health. And I'm not saying it's like an exciting, I just don't think there's any other option apart from, you know, I'm not saying run at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but I'm saying do the things that you procrastinate on, make some decisions, test and trial. And I really like the word prototyping that you use, because, you know, we rarely prototype outside of product, but I think now we've got a prototype with the future of work, we've got a prototype with our processes, we've got a prototype with our service, and if you don't, then it just becomes very small iterations of change, when actually you probably need to take out all those 10 small iterations of change and just take a leap into the future. And I think it's important to context why we think right now is the time to speed up. And what's really resonated with me, and has certainly kicked into touch my own procrastination, is the speed of change generally that we're seeing. So you brought to the table a really wonderful analogy where I think the digital transformation took, say, 15 years. Nearly 15 years, yeah.
The augmentation we're now seeing with artificial intelligence is already moving. Are you saying it's something like 7 times faster?
Yeah, so you've got, if you take a standard technology change curve, digital took, you know, broadly 10 to 15 years, okay? So, and then if you look at where we are from this new industrial era that we find ourselves in, we're almost halfway through that change curve already.
This is the bit that really woke me up as a procrastinator.
So actually, you know, is that 7.5 years in a little over a year of technological change that we've seen. So, and it's not getting any slower, it's getting faster. And it's like, as these models are developing around us and all these new tools we've got at our disposal, they're all getting faster, they're all getting more complex and intelligent, and actually we're teetering on that sort of end of the curve where when you go into that and it beds down as normal, there's only a little bit of space left to not become a laggard.
Become left behind.
We're through the early adopters, we're through here where it's business as usual, and actually, you know, so going faster is a real thing for me at the moment.
Definitely.
And again, I'll stress not to add to anything other than keeping ahead of the curve in terms of transformation. Yeah. Cool.